Excellent. To our reality sandwich community, Kyle here, one of the conscious agents on the reality sandwich team, joined today by another wonderful guest, Erica Siegel. Erica, thank you for joining me here.
Oh, thank you so much, Kyle. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's been awesome following your journey with nest harm reduction and seeing you at all these wonderful psychedelic events. But for our reality sandwich audience who may not know you, could you talk a little bit about yourself and introduce us to the projects you work on in the psychedelic ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So I have been a member of the psychedelic ecosystem for over a decade, probably close to 15 years now. Professionally, I finished my master's in social work in 2010 and moved to Santa Cruz and ended up meeting the team at MAPS and started tabling for MAPS in 2011. Was the volunteer coordinator for the Zendo project, which was their festival outreach peer support program, and was a MAPS trained psychedelic assisted psychotherapy clinical researcher on phase 2 and phase 3 of the MDMA clinical trials. And then in 2019, I left the clinical trial work, and we'll talk a little bit about that in this storytelling, and started Nest Harm Reduction, which provides telehealth psychotherapy, event services, and harm reduction and psychedelic integration and education. Um, Throughout the state of California and at events worldwide. And so we travel all over the world, supporting communities that are looking to create a safe container at their events. We also provide ketamine assisted psychotherapy and variety of modalities of trauma informed care. And this last year, I just founded a nonprofit called the Shine Collective, which is dedicated to supporting survivors of psychedelic harm. So these are individuals who have experienced a traumatic event while under the influence of psychedelics, whether that is through poor facilitation, incorrect dosing, all the way to things that involve criminality, including fraud and sexual abuse and physical violence.
Well put. So, as this is the Share Your Experience series, I'd love for you to share a personal story with me. What was that medicine or that specific experience that inspired you, made a real impact on your journey of life here, and something you continue to reflect on or continue to go back for integration.
Um, yeah, so I'm actually gonna surprisingly talk about my experience as a clinical trial subject in the MDMA assisted therapy training clinical trial.
Wonderful. We've had nobody share their MDMA experience yet, so this is exciting for me.
So mind you, I have had, you know, old recreational experiences with MDMA. And it was really interesting to participate in the clinical trial because as a researcher, I was like, wow, what an interesting setting, right? I come from recreational spaces, and this is like a thing that you take at on a dance floor or at a concert, or right, like this is a recreational substance in a really thick therapeutic container. And so, but the research is pointing towards this is great. And I have definitely seen people in recreational spaces who have severe trauma histories have um, really big experiences on MDMA, and also know that most people who do MDMA assisted psychotherapy um, have reported that like they don't see how it's recreational. And so it's a really interesting substance that kind of based on the setting can really shift the experience. But when we were getting trained, there was a healthy subjects clinical trial for the therapists to have a what a session would be like with two therapists, with our mentors, and then a placebo session as well. So we would know what the experience would be like for our clients to have experience in that setting. And it was an interesting experience, probably not ideal setting for me, given just like my makeup and who I am, but also was like, it's weird to be in a room with two therapists who are not altered, to like kind of have this shared experience where you have like the attention of two people on you. And what that's like when you're in a highly suggestible altered state versus what's that like when you're not, and like the energetic management of kind of this like triad therapy of patient with two facilitators. And it was, a lovely, insightful therapeutic experience. But also kind of was the first like crack in the armor of like me questioning about the work that I want to do as a therapist, the work that I want to do in the psychedelic space. Do I feel like I'm making as much of an impact that I'm called to make as a researcher in these clinical trials? And also what an experience it must be like for my subjects when myself and my clinical partner are working together. And so I think it's impactful because it's like a constant reminder that, the setting that we think is the most therapeutic might not be, given the individual. And so it really helped me broaden my lens in looking at the way individuals access healing and the ways in which psychedelic medicine can create those, little streams and tributaries that all lead us to the river. Knowing that we can't build this one size fits all model. And I think that's the challenge for me in clinical research in this really regimented schedule, is I don't think that that's actually the optimal route for most people. But also knowing that this is one path. And so it helped me look for other paths.
Could you walk me through the setting and kind of the process behind, how much did they dose you during this therapy session? What kind of room did they have you in, and what was the
Yeah, so
modality of the therapists?
I was at the Boulder, Colorado site, which was an MDMA clinical trial site. It was therapy office with a couch and two chairs and a table and bookshelf and similar vibes. And we did like a prep session that was non-medicine assisted, and then would go in for a blinded session, and then a day off, then an integration day, and then another session, depending on what one's MDMA, one's placebo. You don't know which one you're going to get. And what I found, so I'd go in, do all the prep, then blood pressure, blah blah blah. And mind you, this was 8 years ago. I mean, we're talking about like a while ago. And so, my memory's not that fresh for me. And then, clinical dosing. And so 120 milligrams, with a 60 milligram booster.
Oh,
wow. And, dim lights, headphones, blankets, like just like the promo pictures look like. And felt more like a deep meditation session with, some interaction, some discomfort, of just like restlessness for myself. But I also found that the placebo session was really hard.
Mhm.
was, what am I going to talk about for 6 hours? Like,
Oh
right?
wow.
It's like, I'm done processing for the day. Like,
Hmm.
how are we going to fill the next 3 hours of our time together?
Hmm.
And recognizing how uncomfortable that must be for participants, for trial participants.
Yeah.
And so then the session would wrap, and I'd go back and was staying at a place in Boulder, and then go back into the clinic for the next day for follow up and everything else. But just to like kind of have the lived experience of what being a subject in a clinical trial is like, when it comes to, you know, following all of the instructions and making sure you don't eat anything or drink anything after midnight, and like really trying to know what it's like to take people through a clinical trial. I thought it was really informative to the work that I do now.
Wonderful. What is, for somebody not familiar or kind of eager to try, what is taking MDMA like? Why is MDMA the focus from MAPS and a lot of other people on as the, quote, say poster child for therapeutic healing experiences?
I mean, prior to its scheduling, it was being used as a therapeutic drug, specifically in couples therapy.
Hmm.
Developed or rediscovered by Sasha Shulgin, and really, and his wife, and they were kind of like the grandparents of psychedelic therapy.
Hmm.
And so it was almost like developed to be a therapeutic tool. And the side effects were, it's also really fun to dance on and to party on, and so like, it's heart opening. You feel better social connections, things like that. It does obviously have its risks, especially in recreational settings. There are some health risks and some contraindicated medications and things like that. Um, but nobody really expected MDMA to become a Schedule One drug when it got scheduled. Everybody was expecting it to stay accessible for therapeutic use, and so this has kind of been the fight for therapists to be able to use the tools that we should be able to access for therapeutic healing. And I think that's really where the work for MDMA was oriented, was because that was the thing that was being used in therapy offices before it was scheduled.
Beautifully put. When you reflect on your experience with the trials and now you're when you coach people, whether to use MDMA or just as you're advising people, what do you reflect on from that experience, and how do you take that to and apply to the work you do now?
Wait, say that again. Can you ask me that again?
Reflecting on your work in the clinical trials, how did you take that experience and modify it or learn from it and use that as part of your own integration, and then applying that to the patients you work with and advise?
Okay, sure. I think it was a great lesson in like learning what's not for me. um, and also understanding that it is for some people,
Hmm.
and seeing all of the great work that all of the researchers are doing, all of the patient care, all of the considerations, the infrastructure in creating these clinics. There are a lot of people who strongly believe that like this is their route to
Mhm.
helping heal the world. Um, and it's totally valid and respected and needed, and also not for everyone.
Mhm.
I talk to a lot of people who are like, yeah, psychedelics. I want to get into psychedelics. I want to open up a psychedelic retreat center. And I'm like, cool. Do you know how to run a retreat center? And they're like, no, not at all. I have no background in that. And I'm like, cool. Do you know like how to deal with like severe mental health things? And they're like, nope, have no background in that either. And I'm like, well, then why do you want to open up like a mental health retreat center if you don't have that as your experience? We need lawyers. We need people who can help us, write contracts. We need people who can do social media marketing. We need people who can really like help with the outside infrastructure. And so this idea of like, I want to get into psychedelics and I want to facilitate as a psychedelic, like as the archetype that I want to fill in this community. It's really hard work to do. And really hard containers to hold, especially when you're working with people who have really severe trauma. It has a really high burnout rate. It has a really high, you don't make a ton of money doing this work, right? I don't know any, multimillionaire therapists out there, right? That's not like the why we get into this work. But also kind of using that as an integration tool of helping define where you want to be in the landscape and how you want to help move the goalposts forward. Because we need people in media, we need people hosting events, we need people, helping us in all sorts of avenues to bring forward the psychedelic renaissance.
What is the importance of the psychedelic media ecosystem, and what role do these storytellers play in holding the community accountable and making sure we're sharing and telling the right stories?
Oh, goodness. That's a hard conversation to have because it seems like people, a lot of times, it's about privilege and access, right? Um, I'm assuming that if you're watching this, that you have internet access and that you have a device to be on the internet with and can afford a bill for that and everything else. And there are so many people out there um, that are struggling and also doing good work and right and are raising families and can't have a big social media presence and beware of the things that are super shiny out there, the people that are like, I'm endorsed by all of these people, and like the big social media presence people that might have the funding behind them but might not also have the integrity. And so knowing that there are, and then there's people who are doing great work who also have great social media presence, and that is like wonderful and amazing. But it's from a place of privilege that we get to even record these conversations and put them on the internet. And so I think that double checking, triple checking. One of a survivor that I work with at Shine, really encourages everyone to just run a background check on your facilitators, right? There are lots of people out there who are parading around who have criminal records or have violent criminal records. And so, making sure that your facilitator is testing their substances and don't just trust the next person, right? Like make sure that we're using all of these different like media channels and all of the things that we have access to spread the word of safety and risk reduction around these substances.
Excellent. With MDMA, where do you see the future trajectory of the substance? Is it going to be locked behind a therapist's office and only used in a clinical setting, or will we see, as we've seen with the psilocybin, people popping up with their chocolate brands and having the shiny packaging and selling it at the club, and making sure people get it at the festival as well?
Right.
Or is there room for both?
So I think there's for sure room for both, but like, right, like one thing you can grow in your backyard
Mhm.
or your closet or wherever people are growing mushrooms these days. And one thing is a pharmaceutical substance that is going to be regulated. That does not mean that like all of the MDMA that is currently being consumed outside of clinical trials is all coming from clandestine labs and will probably continue to do so. But I think I think the commercialization of a substance isn't going to stop it from being on the black market.
Mhm.
But it will affect things like purity and dosing and just like safe drug supply. I wish that everyone could have safe drug supply, and that it wasn't locked behind a therapist's office. But in this pharmaceutical controlled capitalist model, like, yeah, I think MDMA is going to be prescribable in a clinical setting. And I don't think that, I think that there will be a separate unregulated MDMA market that currently exists today that will continue to exist.
And I think that'll shine importance on projects like Nest that you're working on. Making sure people can test their drugs and know they're getting a safe supply.
Yeah. And so if you need a drug testing kit, go to dancesafe.org or bunkpolice.com. You can buy a testing kit. They will teach you how to use them. I strongly encourage that every home that has psychedelic consumption in it should also have a testing kit in it, along with Narcan and fentanyl testing strips. So,
Do you think we'll see? I feel like festivals and a lot of bars and clubs and venues are still hesitant to acknowledge the recreational drug use going on inside their events, inside their venues. How do we make sure? How do we? What advocacy work have you done to get venues on board on being front and center with, like, hey, here's a safe place to test your drugs, or just, hey, you can cut. Here's the safe place to come down if you're having a bad trip.
so yeah, the horrific silver lining of the opiate crisis. I don't think that there's any like really public venue that doesn't have Narcan in it, given
Hmm.
the fentanyl crisis. Every public school has Narcan in it, and so I don't know why club promoters would be against that. And I think having this conversation around safety and harm reduction is really important and vital. I think that every person should be carrying Narcan in America, or at least have some accessible.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think that that kind of has opened up the dialogue for risk reduction.
Hmm.
Um, I think people are still hesitant for drug testing. I think we're seeing changes to that in states like Colorado, where there is now legalization or decriminalization of certain plant medicines. And so I think that Colorado's kind of going to lead the way in their festivals and how they're going to address things like psychedelic consumption in a decriminalized state and what that looks like. Here in California, obviously, we don't have decrim, and so everything is still illegal and federally illegal and state illegal, and so it's a different landscape here in America, in California. And so I really think that we're going to see a lot of shifts and changes as we watch these bills roll out, even with the change in scheduling of cannabis, and really looking at the way that music venues and events and stuff are handling cannabis use. And so smoking sections and things like that. I don't think there'll ever be like a do your drugs over here section at a concert venue. But we're definitely seeing, more education, more access, more information coming out.
As an educator, if somebody approaches you looking, wanting to try MDMA for the first time in a non-therapeutic setting, what do you advise or point them in the direction of, for a proper dose, first time dosage and setting, making sure they're in a proper setting?
Yeah. Well, I usually go through kind of like a safety discernment questionnaire with
Hmm.
people. Are you on any other medications? Do you know how to test your drugs? Here's the dosing for the clinical trial. you should go to Arrowhead and psychedelic.support and read up on all of the information on this substance. And so I guide people to educational resources that are already out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then help them kind of be like, do you have a support person? Do you have a plan if something goes wrong? Is a friend sitting for you? Are you taking it together? I have a big rule, which is like, if you haven't taken it at home, like, don't take it in public.
Mm-hmm.
Try it out first. And make sure that this is something that you want, an experience that you would like to be in public on. Because sometimes people will take something because, they get it at a festival or at a club and take it there
Mm-hmm.
and have, a really challenging experience. Yeah. And so, did that answer the question?
Yes, well put. Where can people follow you? Where would you like to point people, and who is your Nest and other programs right for? What you just spoke at a District 216 wonderful psychedelic community event up in Santa Barbara. Where can people catch you next?
We'll be at District 216's Music and Psychedelic events on May 18th. We will also, hopefully we'll be doing some public events in the autumn here in Southern California. But really, if you are psychedelically curious, looking for a new therapist based in California, you can reach out to us at www.nestharmreduction.com. We take insurance. We do ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. We do psychedelic integration. If you want to, we'll do public trainings. We do private trainings for psychedelic societies. If you're a psychedelic clinic and want to have a review of your safety protocols, we can help with that as well. If you are a survivor of psychedelic harm, or you think that you have been harmed by a psychedelic practitioner, you can reach out to us at www.shinesupport.org. There's also our storytelling platform that is on there if you want to anonymously submit a story to us. You can also follow us on Instagram at shinesupport.org or at Nest Harm Reduction. You can personally follow me at Psychedelic Social Work. And if you want some good psychedelic musings, I have a small millennial psychonaut Instagram as well that has a little bit of just more kind of psychedelic memes and musings. You can follow me there.
Beautifully put, Erica. Thank you for sharing with us today and sharing your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Kyle. I look forward to more of these.